So this from Richard Seltzer, a surgeon at Yale University, who found out I was reading his stories now over decades and sent me a message of appreciation. He was so glad that they weren't just there on his books in the shelves, but they were coming alive. And here is a story about Yeshe Dondhen, the physician to the Dalai Lama. On the bulletin board at Yale Medical School in the front hall where I work, there appeared an announcement. Yeshe Dondhen will make rounds at 6 a.m. on the morning of June 10th. The particulars were given, followed by the notation, Yeshe Dondhen is personal physician to the Dalai Lama. Though I am a skeptic, I could not ignore this emissary from the gods. So on the morning of June 10th, I joined the clutch of white coats waiting in the small conference room adjacent to the ward selected for the rounds. The air in the room is heavy with ill-concealed dubiety and suspicion of bamboozlement. At precisely 6 o'clock, he materializes, a short, golden, barrelly man dressed in a sleeveless robe of saffron and maroon. His scalp is shaven, and the only visible hair is a scanty black line above each hooded eye. He bows in greeting while his young interpreter makes the introduction. Yeshe Dondhen, we are told, will examine a patient selected by a member of the staff. The diagnosis is unknown to Yeshe Dondhen as it is to the rest of us. The examination of the patients will take place in our presence, after which we will reconvene in the conference room where Yeshe Dondhen will discuss the case. We are further informed that Yeshe Dondhen has purified himself by bathing, fasting, and prayer. I, having breakfasted well and performed only the most desultory ablutions and given no thought at all to my soul, glanced furtively at my fellows. Suddenly, we doctors seem a soiled, uncouth lot. The patient had been awakened early, told she was to be examined by a foreign doctor, and had been asked to produce a fresh specimen of urine, so that when we entered her room, the woman shows no surprise. She had long ago taken on that mixture of compliance and resignation that is the face of chronic illness. This was but another in an endless series of tests and examinations. For a long time, Yeshe Dondhen steps from the doorway to her bedside and stands apart watching. He gazes at the woman, favoring no part of her body with his eyes, but seeming to fix his glance at a place just above her supine form. I, too, study her. No physical sign or obvious symptom gives a clue as to the nature of her disease. At last, he takes her hand, raising it in both of his. Now he bends over the bed in a kind of crouching stance, his head drawn down into the collar of his robe. His eyes are closed as he feels for her pulse. In a moment, he has found the spot, and for the next half an hour, he remains thus, suspended above the patient, like some exotic golden bird with folded wings, holding the pulse of the woman beneath his fingers, cradling her hand in his. All the power of the man seems to have been drawn down into this one purpose. It is palpation of the pulse raised to the state of high ritual. From the foot of the bed where I stand, it is as though he and the patient have entered a special place of isolation, apartness, about which a vacancy hovers, and across which no violation is possible. After a moment, the woman rests back upon her pillow. From time to time, She raises her head to look at the strange figure above her, then sinks back once more. I cannot see their hands join in a correspondence that is exclusive, intimate, his fingertips receiving the voice of her sick body through the rhythm and throb she offers at her wrist. But all at once, I am envious, not of him, not of Yeshe Dondhen for his gift of beauty and holiness, but of her. I want to be held like that, touched so, received. And I know that I, who have palpated 1,000 pulses, have not felt a single one. At last, Yeshe Dondhen straightens, gently places the woman's hand upon the bed and steps back. The interpreter produces a small wooden bowl and 2 sticks. Yeshe Dondhen pours a small portion of the urine specimen into the bowl and proceeds to whip the liquid with the 2 sticks. This he does for several minutes until a foam is raised. Then, bowing above the bowl, he inhales the odor 3 times. He sets down the bowl and turns to leave. All this while, he's not uttered a single word. As he nears the door, the woman raises her head and calls out to him in a voice at once urgent and serene. "Thank you, doctor," she says, and touches with her other hand the place he had held on her wrist, as though to recapture something that had visited there. Yeshe Dondhen turns back for a moment to gaze at her, smiles, and then steps into the corridor. Rounds are at an end. We are seated once more in the conference room. Yeshe Dondhen speaks now for the first time in soft Tibetan sounds I've never heard before. It has barely begun when the young interpreter begins to translate the 2 voices continuing in tandem, a bilingual fugue, the one chasing the other. It is like the chanting of monks. He speaks of winds coursing through the body of the woman, currents that break against barriers, eddying. These vortices are in her blood, he says, the last spendings of an imperfect heart. Between the chambers of her heart, long before she was born, a wind had come and blown open a deep gate that must never be opened. Through it charged the full waters of her river, as the mountain stream cascades in the springtime, battering, knocking loose the land and flooding her breath. Thus he speaks and is silent. "May we now have the diagnosis?" the professor asks. The host of these rounds, the man who knows, answers. "Congenital heart disease," he says. "Interventricular septal defect with a resultant heart failure. A gateway in the heart, I think, that must not be opened. Through it charged the full waters of her breath, flooding. So here then is the doctor to listening to the sounds of the body, to which the rest of us are deaf." I know, the doctors to the gods can listen to what we are deaf to. And I remember now and then as I make my rounds, that sound of his voice, like an ancient Buddhist prayer, its meaning long since forgotten, only the music remaining, and that a jubilation possesses me, and I too feel myself touched by something divine. It's an extraordinary story, a tender one, a wise one, about what it means to really listen deeply, whether it's the climate or the recent pandemic or the politics that we share or our concerns. They're all symptoms, and they're all rooted in the human heart.